Hey everybody, welcome. Today we are actually doing a presentation on felling trees safely. So we are actually going to just jump right in. Felling trees safely. What trees are taken down? That's a great question. It depends, of course. You can take trees down for aesthetic reasons if they are, or if they are in the way, if you're building something, if you are trying to make a trail, you can take down just any generic tree. But if you are out in the wilderness and you have established trails, sometimes they do still take trees down, and those are generally hazard trees, trees that might be leaning, they might have something busted, they might be um, a hazard if they are leaning across the trail too much. That means that if there is a storm, they are more likely to fall, and they are more likely to fall on a trail where there might be a person. So there are other reasons to take down trees too, if they are diseased, if they are dead. Then it might be prudent just to take them down in case there is a storm, or just to have them out of the way, so that way you don't have to worry about maintenance further down the road. If you are there right now, taking down those potential hazards isn't necessarily a bad thing. So those are the sorts of trees that can be taken down. Also ones that have the insect infestations, if they have those invasives that are, or disease, like oak wilt, you can take those down as well. But otherwise, we're just going to jump right to the next element, and that is personal protective equipment. You wear protective gear, obviously, when you are cutting trees. It is a specialization, and you do want to be safe. So you wear a helmet, you wear gloves, you have ear pro, ear protection, you have your long pants, chainsaw chaps over your pants, and you have your steel composite toe boots. And here is just a more graphic representation of your PPE. Right here, we've got your ear pro, then we've got the chaps. These ones, it was raining, and you do have some of the sawdust from felled trees on them, but that is um, the chaps, and those aren't necessarily required. For a lot of people, might wear chainsaw pants instead, but they are standard for specific environments. They have a special like layer of like a wool that is supposed to jam up the teeth of a chainsaw, so that way the chainsaw gets stuck on all that fiber, and so it doesn't cut through the chap. It gets stuck, and it doesn't get your leg, which is a nice feature. So you also have your boots. We've got a picture over here of the boots, and the seal toe there. You've got your gloves. These are a summer glove. They're pretty thin. You can get them in bulk, pretty cheap. They also have a thicker glove if you are chainsawing in winter. So, and you can chainsaw in winter. You can also chainsaw in the rain per this graphic with the chainsaw chaps. But you do want to be mindful if there is lightning and thunder, you want to be conscientious and maybe get out of the direct rain in that context. But you can, oops, apologies. You can cut trees in the rain. So otherwise, you've got your gloves here. This is an example of a helmet that has a special visor, and it actually has a second pair of ear pro ear protection attached to the helmet. The earmuffs are decent at protection, but they don't have as much noise cancellation as something that you would put directly into the ear. If you have the earplugs over here, that does provide more protection. Um, so it depends on how loud your chainsaws are, and how close you are. If we When I was chainsawing, we did wear both pairs simultaneously. So and that was at your at our discretion, but your choice will be at your discretion. Also, safety goggles here, and of course, per usual, safety first. All right, then we will jump into the equipment. So, for taking down a tree, you will obviously need your chainsaw. You'll want a sledgehammer, and I can explain that in a second. You'll want a wedge kit, that'll be explained too. You'll have your ropes and your weighted ropes. You'll also have chainsaw maintenance equipment to take care of the chainsaw too. Here is another graphic presentation of some of the gear you will have. Here are a few chainsaws. This one is a little bit smaller and it does still appear to be a gas chainsaw. And then here is a larger one. They do come in different sizes and different shapes. You might have one that's super, super tiny. You have electric ones as well, and those have a little less growl to them, but they can also be charged with electric, which can be more sustainable, especially if it is from a sustainable resource like solar or wind power. So that's the element with the electric, but they don't have as much growl, as much power. So that's something to be mindful of, definitely depending upon the size of the tree. You can also have huge, huge, huge blades. This is just kind of a standard, but you can't really see it here. There'll be another picture with the full chainsaw too. So, and then you'll have your toolbox, and we'll go into a little more detail with that. Kind of a life hack here, having extra ear pro in your toolbox and maybe an extra pair of goggles, protective goggles in your toolbox as well is not a bad idea because ear pro always goes missing. And so it is nice to have extra pairs in there, or you might forget it that day. So you can put that in your toolbox. And as a pleasant surprise, if you do leave your ear pro in your pocket when you wash your clothes, it can get any earwax or gross, black, whatever stuffs from felling trees that might get stuck on and in them. It takes it off. And so they're pretty much brand new if you have them in your pocket in the wash. So that was an accidental discovery that is fantastic. So but here's the toolbox, and we'll go into a little more detail here with what's in there exactly. But there's a boot brush, there's a scrunch, you've got another boot brush, a wedge, file, and it looks like a site plan. So which actually we could talk about that. It's good to have a site plan, a map, for safety if you are in on like a trail system to have a map around or with you so that way you can navigate there. Of course, you can take a picture of the map with your phone, and that actually works also, but this is a good option too. So having one available. Here is a close-up of some of that stuff that we saw in the toolbox. Here is a set of files, and the ones that you will generally see used with the chainsaw are the ones here on the left. And this one, the middle one, actually does have a guide on it. So that is actually designed to show you the exact angle you want to go at the chainsaw teeth with. It'll tell you exactly which direction you'll want to be kind of grinding off the old metal and filing it to a sharp point. That is what that guide is for. And otherwise, you can freestyle it. If you are feeling comfortable with the angle at 60 degrees, I'm not necessarily good with math, but you kind of can eyeball it. Once you get used to it, you know the angle and you're like, that's 60 degrees. And then you can just kind of go from there. But this is a file without that guide. So and then this file might be used for other equipment if you want to sharpen your shovels or something of that nature too. So, or an axe or whatever, but it's not a bad thing to have in your toolbox. So this here is a scrunch. Chainsaws do have bolts that need to be loosened and tightened. If the chain becomes loose or if it jumps the track, you will need to get into the machine. So you do want to have the scrunch present. It also has a screwdriver at the bottom, which is why it's called a screwdriver, a scrunch, screwdriver and a wrench. together. And we would actually tuck these into our chainsaw chaps because they had the elastic that wrapped around our legs, and so we could easily tuck them there and have like part of it in our boot. So that way we always had the scrunch on us, just for ease of maintenance. So it's a very important tool if you do use your chainsaw, to be able to get in and out of that chamber on that chainsaw. These are brushes. We have a boot brush. That's good for if you are going between sites and you want to get invasives off, but it is also good to get sawdust out of the chamber of your chainsaw, and it's also good to just get any excess of the sawdust off of any element of the chainsaw also. The same with, you can use a traditional paintbrush as well. Gasoline can be used if you want to do a detailing. It actually does kind of clean up the inside of the chamber also. We did use that in the shop. And then you can also use rags too in the chamber of the chainsaw for a full in-depth clean. I know a lot of people don't necessarily know how to maintain their chainsaws and they might not clean them. I know I actually walked through a pawn shop and I was looking at all, they had a number of chainsaws and not a one of them had been cleaned. So you could see the chainsaw, the sawdust on every single one of them. And it kind of made me smile just because we were trained on how to do it. And we had to do it pretty much daily, but we also, of course, would take down a lot of trees during the day as well. If you do use it maybe once, for one tree here and there, a cleaning might not be as necessary, but it's still good to know how to do it. So the brushes here do help. And then we have this guy here. This I will be honest, I don't know the full capacity of this particular device, but I do know that we used the tip of it up here to actually get into the grooves of the nose of the chainsaw that held the chain on. There is a little groove that sometimes you get some sawdust into and some, oil stuffs. And so we would just kind of scoop out the gunk with this tip here. You can also use the flat edge as a screwdriver if you don't use the scrunch for it. This will work for any screws that are inside the chamber if you need to loosen something to get inside. This also works for that too. So here we've got the sledgehammer and a wedge, and we'll go into a little bit of detail about why you would want those for the front cut, back cut scenario once we get into the cutting of the tree. But this is the sledgehammer and you have a wedge here. Having a few wedges isn't necessarily a bad idea. And these ones that you can kind of see they're bit up on the end, that means that they were used. So sometimes this is like a hard plastic wedge, and the sledgehammer has dented it so that you kind of wail on it if you want it to go in if it's being stubborn. So it can take a bit of a beating, and the plastic can show that too. So up here you also have the ropes. You might need ropes, and we'll talk about that a little bit also. But if a tree gets stuck and it's not falling, if it's stuck in another tree's branches, you might need a little bit of a pulling moment where you manually fell it. You kind of get it unstuck essentially, and so ropes come in handy for that. But here is a steel chainsaw. Ta-da! So here you can see we've got the handlebar, we've got the safety guard up here. So you can press that. You pull it if you want to start the machine, and then you press it when you've stopped, so that way it doesn't start on accident. We've got the chamber here. This is what I was talking about. You can see right there, there is the bolt that you will need the scrunch for, the wrench element here, and this is the nose, and you also have the chain here with the teeth. You've also got the chamber on the other side. It'll have the place where you put gas in and where you also put oil in. And there's also a choke element in the back, and there's a little doodad that you can change it for weather appropriateness. It's like a weather setting, so a winter or a summer setting. Um, but it's pretty cool actually. You've got the safety button in the back because you can't pull the trigger unless you have the safety button depressed, just so that way you don't start the chainsaw on accident again. So safety first, safety consciousness. Looks like someone was sharpening this because you've got the file right next to it. So woohoo! That is what a chainsaw looks like. This is a typical gas chainsaw. And this is kind of what the teeth look like. Um, you can kind of look, it looks like this one, it could use a cleaning. You can see some sawdust in there. Um, and And just looking at this angle, it doesn't exactly look like a 60 degree. I would probably make it a little bit sharper, but um, ta-da, we've got the teeth there. So this one could use a cleaning and a sharpening. And you can also use an air compressor too to kind of blow some of that stuff out. I know with the teeth, it might be a little tougher. Obviously, you don't want to. It might bite into a rag if you were to use it. You've got your brush, but sometimes with some of that detail work, the brush can be a little putsy. So you can use an air compressor as well on this or in the chamber of the chainsaw also. There are environmental factors when you are felling a tree. So you do want to check for tree lean, other trees and elements to avoid in the environment. For when the tree falls, you want to make sure that it doesn't hit anything. People or animals, but also structures, or if you need to keep it from hitting another tree, you just want to look and be aware of what is there. You also need that safety zone around it, around that tree that you will be felling. And so you will want to clear that away and have a direct line of exiting, of safe exiting. And we'll talk about that. I actually didn't make a slide, and that's bad on me, but you will want to ensure that you can get away safely. Tree lean also, there are actually pictures on the next page, and I think that will kind of explain that well. But if a tree is leaning, especially if it is like leaning over a trail, then it'll probably fall over the trail, which is one of the reasons it would be deemed a hazard tree. But we will look at the photos here. These are examples of trees. They do not need to be felled. These are just beautiful, gorgeous trees, but they are good examples of potential trees you might see out and about. So this one here is straight up and down. You're looking for the tree lean. It looks pretty straight up and down, maybe a slight tilt. You will want to have a whole 365. You want to go all the way around it so you can actually tell, because sometimes it might look like it's straight up and down, but it looks like there might be a very subtle lean, perhaps to the right. It does have a few branches as well that kind of lean left, but we've also got a larger branch to the left here that might add a little bit of extra weight to make that tree fell to the left. So you'd want to do a 365. You want to go all the way around and look at it and determine from all angles where it might fall. But there we have it on the label, no distinctive lean, one larger limb low on the left. And you could actually even take that limb off if it's within your reach. You don't want to chainsaw above your head, but if it is, at a comfortable level, you can take that off. But we're going to talk about that when we, again, get a little farther into this presentation. This is another tree that is actually directly by a playground. So if you were to take it down, you would not want it to fall on the playground equipment or on any children or people that are there. There's also a path here. This is also a parking lot, and so you wouldn't want it to fall on cars either. So of course you would set up a perimeter to make sure that that wouldn't happen, but You can see that it does have a little bit of a lean. That if you look at the makeup of the branches, it does have some coming up to the left, but it just looks larger on the right, and it has this obviously large limb off to the right as well. So it's got per the label here too, a huge branch leaning away from the playground equipment. So that is fantastic. That means that it would fall towards the parking lot. And of course, you do want to do a full circle around to do a full assessment. There was an outbuilding behind it also, and so you don't want it to fall in the building, but luckily this one looks like it would be okay to fall into the street here. This one is has a distinctive tree lean. It is definitely not a 90-degree angle. It is up and to the side, and so probably 45 degrees, would you say that is? So it's definitely just going to fall like directly down. There could be some other way, but I would be willing to presume that it would just fall straight down. It's got all of the branches that directly up, and so that would be the extra weight that would just take it down. So distinctive lean, and that's kind of the lean that you're looking for. This one also has a little bit of a lean to the right, and it is complemented by that huge branch off to the right too. So this one, less of a lean. There might be a lean. It does have one larger limb. This one, um, it's a little more of a mystery, but it's also very thin, and so it might not cause as much damage if you don't 100% know which direction. Sometimes you can presume which direction it'll fall, but on these ones, it might surprise you, which can be surprising. It can be surprising because you can pick the angle, you can cut your front cut, you can do your back cut, and then out of nowhere it just falls the opposite direction. And that does happen sometimes. Some of the trees have mysterious ways, and you do the best you can. But with a tree like this, it is a little bit thinner, and so it might not be as big of a hazard. Other trees that are pretty thin, like buckthorn, you can kind of even hold up so it doesn't even fall. You can grab it and just kind of pull it from where it is, especially if it's in a copse of buckthorn. The other branches will keep it up, and then you just take it down. So it really depends on the environment too. But these are all kind of solo trees. It is more difficult to fell trees that are closer together. Like if you see this like wind block area in the back, um, there are more trees directly next to them, and so that does add an element of uncertainty, a little more challenge to the cut. So procedure, you do want to check the environment, and that does mean finding that safety exit. So we can just quick look at this tree here. Actually, let's do this one. This tree here is going to fall down directly below where it is. And so you're going to do your front cut here. This one might be tough though, because it might pinch your blade. So you will want to be conscientious of that. But you would want to go in the opposite direction for your exit. So you would do the front cut here, right kind of down where it would, on the side that it would be falling towards. And then um, you will also be doing the back cut, which, well, sorry, apologies, I got distracted for a second. Um, just a long pause. But you will be doing the front cut there, and you will be doing a wide angle, but your first angle will just be directly into the tree, and so your blade might get stuck. And so that's something to be conscientious of. And there are tricks to getting it out. Um, so we might talk about that later too. That might be another presentation when things go wrong. But anyway, this is a good example. You would want to have your exit path to the left, where the tree would fall to the right. So directly behind that, you would want to walk quickly away. Obviously, this here has snow, so you would want to clear that snow. So you want to make sure there are no tripping hazards. If there are root systems, if there are felled logs there, you want to get those out of your way. So that way you can just book it out of there and safely, conscientiously, just get away from that tree when it is falling. So you want to check the environment, determine the angle of the felling and the best place for the cuts, which we sort of talked about. Um, Take off low-hanging branches that may be in the way of a safe cut. We kind of talked about that. If this is low, you could take that out. Looks like there are some low branches down here that might get in the way of a back cut, so you can take that scruff off. You can take those skinny ones off the back there. And you can kind of clean it up so that way you can stand comfortably and not have tree in your face, in your arms. You don't want to trap yourself in. It's another safety element. If you um, feel like there are branches on your back, you might hit them with your body when you're exiting. You might get stuck, or they might catch your sweatshirt or something like that. You just want to take any of those out from that tree. You do want to have people around acting as wards for your safety and for the safety of passersby, and communicate when you're cutting. So I know like this is a park, and so you will want to have people. You want to make sure that they are 2 tree lengths away from the height of this tree, just for safety, because this is going to fall. And so if they are closer than 2 tree lengths, the tree might fall on them, essentially, is the thought process. And so it's obviously not an exact science. So you want to have the 2 trees just to ensure that you're safe. Um, and so you want to be conscientious. And then generally, I know we had cones, traffic cones, bright orange, and we were wearing our fluorescent, and we had helmets on. Of course, everyone needs to have helmets on, even the guards, even the wards. And they want to have their ear pro in. They want to be watching for anybody who's going to pass by so they can say, hey, wait, no, they are felling the tree. We need to wait until they're done for safety reasons. So you want to have them there. And also, if you do get hurt, you want to have those people around so that way you someone can call 911, or someone can apply first aid if you are injured. So you do want to have people there. They're good for safety. Mhm. But we had signals, just because everybody's got their ear pro in, they might not hear it. I mean, you're going to yell, but you can also tap your helmet. I think for us, it was um, tap 1 to let them know something, tap 2 if you are prepared, and then tap 2. So you would like tap your helmet saying, I'm ready. Then the guards would tap their helmet to indicate that they got the message and that they were ready. And then you would tap your helmet back as a sign that you're cutting. And then you might say cutting, or you might say felling. Just as an added verbal element. So, and you'd say it loud, you'd probably holler it. Uh, you could say timber also. That's a stereotypical, stereotypical. Oh, sorry. A stereotypical, timber. That means that a tree is falling. But you could say cutting, or falling, or but we did tap the helmet as a sign because everybody's got their ear pro in, and you just want to make sure that they do hear and you can recognize that they have heard when you are yelling and ready to cut. So those nonverbal communication elements. And then you cut down the tree. To cut the tree, you do a front cut, which is a 90-degree angle, and you do a back cut and use the wedges if needed to ensure that it falls if it is stubborn, and it falls in the right direction. And then you can low stump as well. That's part of cutting the tree. If after you've got the tree down, if you want to not have a stump there, then you would low stump it. But we'll go into more detail. This is probably a foreign language to some folks. What is it? What are they talking about? These are kind of niche terms. So this is a front cut. When you look at the tree here, we kind of already talked about you would want to do your front cut on the leaning side with the back cut on the back side of the tree. And so this is a straight up and down tree, but this is going to fall in the direction that this cut is. So it's going to go to the right here. I don't know if that was explained well, but this is a front cut. You want it to be a third of the tree in depth. So you look at the tree objectively, and you need that front cut to be a third of the tree wide. And then you want it to be at a 90-degree angle for safety. I know some folks might do smaller, more of a Pac-Man-y. I don't know if you know that reference, a Pac-Man-y type angle, maybe like a 60-degree angle. And you can see it that it goes straight down, and then this is actually a very good cut, and then it goes down here. So, and this is mid cut too, so you can see some of the sawdust flying off this. It is a little bit grainy of a photo, but this is the chainsaw here. The blade is in this cut. You've got the first cut here, and then coming from the top, or you can also come from the bottom too, but it's you want that to be a third of the tree in width. If you look at the tree, it goes from here. This is the back, this is the front, and that looks 1/3, 2/3. That is exactly where you want it. So it's a good cut, 90-degree angle. And that's so it doesn't what they call it is barber shop. You wanna it might kind of it's just safer so it doesn't like inadvertently go backwards and hit you, or it's supposed to, with this combination and the back cut, it's supposed to ensure that it falls exactly where you want it. It's just a safety precaution, a safety procedure. And that here is the back cut, and I do apologize that you can't see the front cut in this photo to compare, but it's supposed to be about an inch from the front cut, and it's supposed to be an inch above the angle, like the where the two cuts in the front connect. It's supposed to be about an inch above it and an inch behind it, an inch above and behind. And that is for mathematics and for the momentum of the tree, the weight of the tree should take it directly down. If you have that back cut there, this one has a wedge in it. That means that it was being stubborn and it wasn't going down. And I don't know if this branch might have been a factor, a detriment there. If that is a branch, or it looks like it is actually, but if that's a limb that's keeping it where it is. But this was actually a chainsawing, the first day of chainsawing practice. So I think it was the first day, but But so it's okay. You're not every cut is going to be perfect, and not every cut is going to be right, and sometimes they're going to give you grief, and it's not going to be an exact 90-degree angle. It might be too big, it might be too shallow. You kind of get into the swing of things a little bit more once you have more practice. Um, but some trees can be feisty. It can be hard to really get that chainsaw into some of the trees. So you just want to give it your best go. And again, that back cut lands an inch from the front cut, and you want it to be above that junction, above that corner, that angle, that 90-degree angle. You want it to be 1 inch above. And that should just take the tree directly down. From there, you delimit and then you swamp it. That's a technical term. It's a one of those chainsaw terms, but you delimit, so that means that you take off any of those branches that are going to give the trunk that added weight, because you are going to have to move that trunk. If it falls into the woods, then you can leave it lay. You don't have to uh, move it. That means that you can leave the limbs on it. But if it is over a trail, or if you need to get it out of the way of something, then you will want to take the limbs off, and then you will quote unquote swamp it, which means grab those elements and get them off that trail, or get them to a pile that you're going to burn. It just means getting them out of the way, and they call it swamping. So you delimit and then you swamp it. And when you do this, um, you want to make sure that you're communicating, letting people know, I've got the chainsaw. You don't want people coming up behind you, getting into your safety circle. If they want to swamp and the tree hasn't been delimbed yet, you want to make sure that you, as the person with the chainsaw, that you get the limbs back and out of the way so people can grab them for you. So they are helping you. With this element of the work. It'll save you energy as the sawyer, and then it will also um, be good for the team to work together on these projects. But you don't want to have maybe too much going on for safety. You want to make sure that you have that safety circle in place. Um, and of course, the chainsaw blades might wedge when you are delimbing as well. If you are cutting the trunk, it can pinch, and sometimes you can kind of wiggle that back out. Sometimes you have to take the nose off of your chainsaw and then work it from there. If you can get the blade unstuck without the rest of the chainsaw on, that might be a good practice. You can also do another cut farther down the trunk to get some of the extra weight off. If it is that weight that is probably pinching it, then you can see if there is another cut that's going to release that weight. But then you would have to have a secondary chainsaw if you want to make that cut, because your first chainsaw is wedged. So there are different tips and tricks for unwedging your chainsaw. It does happen. It is going to happen. But being mindful of the wedging, you can also kind of go up from. You can to mitigate this, to try and keep it from happening. You can kind of do like an angle cut on the top, or you can have a cut from below too, as a pressure release, or to kind of ensure that you don't have to go as far down with the top cut, where it might get pinched. So you can mitigate that too, even before your chainsaw does get wedged. If you see the potential for it getting wedged, you can try to stop it in advance and use special cuts uh, to avoid that. But there is also a kickback potential with a chainsaw, especially when you are delimbing and kind of cutting the trunk into pieces that are light enough that you can move easily. And there is the kickback zone on the nose of the chainsaw. And I'm going to go back to the picture of the chainsaw. It's a ways back, but I think it'll be worth it to kind of point. It is like right here on the nose. That is kind of where it might, and a kickback is where you hit it just right that it kind of wants to, it jolts backwards. And so if you're not aware that there is a kickback zone or that there is a potential for a kickback zone, it could scare you, it could jar you. You could drop the chainsaw, and then there is just a potential for cutting something that you didn't mean to cut, if it jolts back on you unexpectedly. And so that is up here on the nose, kind of on the corners almost. That's the kind of the kickback area on the chainsaw. So you want to just be mindful of that. You don't want to lose control of the machine. You want to have control of the machine and have control of your cutting and the cuts that you make when you are delimbing and also when you are felling. So lots of science involved. I do not know any of the specific numbers or angles for those things. Just preliminary knowledge here, but it is good stuff to know. So what happens when the tree doesn't fall, or if it's going in the wrong direction? That is a great question. Hold on. That is when you do pull out your wedge kit. And this is an example of a wedge in a back cut. This tree did not want to fall, and so they're trying to help it. What they do is they stick the wedge in to their back cut, and then they the angle of that wedge is going to be pushed in. You're going to use your sledgehammer and hammer it in. And obviously the wedge does get thicker. And so that's going to push in, and it's going to be more of an angle. And so it's going to be a force with that angle that kind of pushes the tree up more, which means it should fall in the direction of that front cut. It should be more likely to fall in the direction of that front cut because the back angle has been increased. So it's just to kind of get more of the weight from up here to go in the direction it was naturally inclined to go in. But, and this, I think, Sawyer 2, I was actually only trained in the preliminary Sawyer 1. Sawyer 2, I think, goes into more detail on that. If it is stuck, if it's going in the wrong direction, then you can take multiple wedges and kind of wedge them in as a don't fall in this direction, do not fall in this direction. And then you can have multiple wedges shoved into the side so that way it goes to the opposite side, if it is kind of leaning in a particular way, or if there is even the slightest chance and you really, really cannot have it falling in that direction. You can kind of use your wedges as a security element to ensure that it does not fall that direction, unless the weight is exceptional. But again, that is a little bit beyond my scope. I've seen other folks do that, but it is more technical than I've had true experience with. So, but that is if it is going in the wrong direction. If it can also get caught, like we said before, the limbs can get caught in other trees if there are other trees nearby. And so that means it might not fall. Even here, it might not fall if the wedge just really is not working. You can kind of try and deepen your back cut a little bit. And there are risks with that. If you deepen your back cut or if you deepen your front cut a little bit, I would argue you don't want to deepen your front cut because that would put you more in a danger zone. The back cut is right by your running backward space. This is your safety, you walk away from that back cut this direction. And so if you're looking at the front cut, you're more on the side slash in the front with the saw. And so that is more dangerous. And so you would probably potentially try to deepen that back cut, use the wedges, but you can also look at the ropes, especially if it has already fallen, if it has detached from this bottom stump, or if it's, you know, barely hanging on, if it's just got that sliver of that inch of that front cut, back cut gap on the tree, you can use the ropes. And that's why you need a weighted rope, because a weighted rope gives you something, the weight has that momentum that you can throw it into the limbs of the tree. So that way, if you have just a rope, it might not be heavy enough, or it might not be easy enough to throw and get that momentum to go very, very high into this tree, depending on how tall it is, or having that weight really does make a big difference. And then once you get it through a limb that you want to choose a limb that's on an appropriate side for felling, and then you also want to make sure that it's, a thick enough limb that it's not just going to break if you do pull. And so it's got to be a good choice of a limb. And then you tie a secondary rope, if it like a thicker rope, um, to the weighted rope. And then unless your weighted rope is thick enough to do the trick, to get through the limb, and then you wrap it around the trunk and secure it, and then you pull it in the direction that you need it to fall. But you want to ensure that you're not in the path or in the space of the branches. You don't want to pull it and have it fall directly on you. So you need to have that distance. You need to be far enough away that you're pulling it towards the direction you need it to fall, but you're far enough away that it's not going to fall on you. And that's what the ropes help you to do. If it's going in the wrong direction, if it's stuck, you can pull it down, especially if it's a hazard. If it is over a trail, you can't just leave it there. You can't just allow it to be standing, but and maybe falling at any point in the future. You do need to take care of it and make sure that it is not a hazard in the future. So you do need to take it down. You need to pull it to the side, and you need to ensure everyone's safety in doing so. So that's kind of what you do if it's not falling or if it's going in the wrong direction. You have your ropes, you have your wedge kit. I know we even had a very difficult tree, and some sawyers involved a four-wheeler in the rope pulley system, and but that was complex, and it was a very special case, and they were higher up the ranks than I was, so I don't know all the thought process that went into it per se, but you can't leave them there, and so you do have to do something to make sure that they don't pose a threat, aren't a hazard to people in the future. So now, there is a note after you have felled the tree. Each tree does have an established nourishment system of roots still in place, so that growth potential will still be there. It will still manifest unless it is chemmed, unless the tree is chemmed. And to show what I mean, here are some photos. This tree actually wasn't necessarily felled, unless this is could be a stump too, but it's not pictured. But the growth potential created all of these extra epicormic growths, these extra limbs essentially all came up because there was no chemical applied, and it still had all that growth potential. And so it continued to grow. So, and that's actually a technique that you can do. It's not unheard of if you want to have a lot of small limbs, or, for like decorative, if you want to like weave a wreath out of these skinny little uh, limbs, they will get thicker over time. They might be competition for each other, and some of them might break off. But it's a way to create a copse or coppicing. If you were to cut the tree low, it might create that type of tree configuration because of that growth potential. There are some of these um, growths here, and I would argue epicormic growths, that's a term you don't necessarily see. Like here, it's when, gosh, I wish I had a photo of that, but it might be when bugs are in the trees, beetles, and they're eating, and they have the entrances that they burrow through the trunk, through the bark of the trunk. And then you have this type of thing happening up here, or in the trunk below the traditional limb line of the tree. It can be obscure and it can have leaves coming out, and it doesn't look like a traditional branch. Those are called epicormic growths, and that might mean that there is a beetle or a bug infestation. So it might be a factor saying that this is an unhealthy tree, but having those beetles and those insects is also semi-normative as well. Um, and so it just depends on how you feel about the tree and the environment it is in and things like that. But down here, it is close to the ground. And so I don't know. I would argue it is still an epidermic growth, but it could be argued too if there is another term for these. Um, don't think that they would be considered suckers because they are directly on that primary trunk versus coming up from like the root system. But we can putz over the language there at another time. This is a green one. This is in winter, obviously. But this is a green one. You can tell that the tree was felled, and it is a very large, a very thick tree. And so you've got all sorts of green coming up directly on the outside of this trunk. And so this one had a lot of growth potential. It had very large roots. It was a very established tree. And so it was not done. And this is it saying, so all this green around this is all connected to this trunk here. So and this is kind of a similar situation where they've got all sorts of almost, branches coming off this trunk. Um, and it's just indicative of the fact that there was no poison that was absorbed into this trunk. And so the growth potential from the roots is finding ground and it is manifesting. So I think it's beautiful. To see that wherewithal, to see the strength and power of the tree. Less cute if it is invasive and in the way, but it is a force in and of itself. So these are some examples. If you want to apply chem, that might eradicate some of these growths around the ring and stop limbs from developing that you don't want there. Because again, this is a coppicing method to create a copse of a tree, which is just like a grouping of trees directly together. So like three trees kind of coming from one root area. This is kind of a way to do it. But of course, there's a lot here, and the competition and time would probably ascertain just how this was going to happen. But ta-da! So that is kind of your basics about felling a tree. Chemming is another presentation. Does anybody have any questions? Any questions?